5, 4, 3.
And we are back folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Matt the Business, they're on the other side. And this is like on location day, except I'm traveling. But my man Seth, I mean, I got to give so to the Fishers this morning. I bid my show my thanks and gratitude and appreciation for you and being on here with us, Seth, because I know you're dealing with an under the weather kid there. So man, thanks a lot for still coming on this morning.
Well, thank the Wi-Fi here at the Henry Ford ER. So
You're at the Henry Ford emergency room.
it's excellent. If we were at Beaumont, this wouldn't be happening.
Where are you, Sam?
I'm on the road, man. I'm on the road in the Garden State today. I'm making some rounds, So,
And I'm in the studio.
Yeah,
and I'm just in the hobbit hole of my basement, same as usual.
So, guys, I really want to get to talking realignment because that's the hot story in college athletics right now. But let's do the wrap up, and maybe it's not a wrap up of Big Ten Media Days because now we got to revisit Tony Petitti's commentary where he was like, "Hey, it's just focusing on adding USC and UCLA and getting everything squared away there. Clearly, things have changed, or he just wasn't being upfront last week because there are several reports now that Big Ten presidents have met to have discussions about adding Washington and Oregon like now. So before we get to that, though, curious about your thoughts on a couple of things. Jim Harbaugh's no comment at Media Day about the NCAA punishment that's being negotiated. He said, I can't comment on it, but then he added, and I thought this was very noteworthy. He added, I would love to lay it all out for you. We have nothing to be ashamed of. So that's him basically saying this is some bull. I want to tell you that I think it's some bull. And they're trying to say I lied, and I didn't lie. I took all of that from that comment, and I don't think I'm taking a big leap in thinking that, Seth.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can definitely tell that Harbaugh thinks that he didn't lie. And you can definitely tell the NCAA thinks he did. And what the facts of the matter are very hard for us to tell from sitting outside and just kind of looking at this. But, between the two of them, I tend to trust Harbaugh a little more. That might just be my fandom talking. But my experience with the NCAA is that they see things that aren't necessarily there, especially when they really want to.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the same page or very close. I've not always been impressed with Harbaugh's media statements. He tends to have that 1,000-yard stare and penitentiary face that isn't really endearing. Let me put it that way. But I was very impressed with his statement at Big Ten Media Day this time around. I mean, he came across as being completely sincere, and I was happy on his statement. He said essentially, "Hey, we're going to be transparent about this, and I hope he lives up to this. We're going to be transparent about this. I can't tell you what the deal is right now because my attorney, who's a good attorney, incidentally, an excellent attorney, and I've been told to be quiet, but I'm going to lay it out there." That's how I heard him say it, and he ain't buying in, and I don't see him agree. They may agree to some penalties, I don't know, but they're not going to agree to anything with him falling on his sword and saying, "Oh yeah, I lied to the NCAA." So good for him. And I hope he, I think he will. I hope he lives up to that.
I think he quit before he did that.
I think so too, and good for him.
Yeah.
And so this was, oddly enough, for me, a high moment on my feelings towards Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
Oddly enough.
So yeah, that is odd. What do you read anything into? Because someone was talking about this the other day. That report came out last Tuesday. think it was last Tuesday. And normally when a report like that comes out, there's some sort of announcement or resolution that follows shortly thereafter. And here we are over a week later now, and still nothing from the NCAA or Michigan, or as far as this negotiation is concerned. Do you guys read anything into that? Do you think that that the 4-game suspension that was initially reported as being likely, do you think that number is the number, or do you think it'll be something less?
Oh, I've heard
Yeah.
4 games
Well,
and
right.
2 games, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Seth, sorry.
First of all, Craig, if he's a good attorney, then his client wouldn't be saying anything at all ever. But
I like what you said.
but yeah, it felt to me like the release came from the NCAA, and that the release was part like the leak, if you want to say, was part of the negotiation. And it was the NCAA trying to pressure him, trying to get it out there to create a narrative that Harbaugh just needs to accept that he lied and take responsibility. And if he had, they'd be past this. And the only problem is he lied and everything else was tiny. That's the narrative that whoever put out the initial agreement, or whatever agreement they were close to, wanted to get out there. Whether or not that's been the narrative, I think because it came out at the same time as the Tennessee thing, the NCAA, once again, in their infinite wisdom, kind of undermined themselves if that was the point of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say that I generally like, but I'm often confused by Harbaugh. Maybe that's my attitude, but even people who despise Harbaugh, Paul Feinbaum, for example, has lined up behind him. I mean, Paul Feinbaum, who just has never said a single positive word about the dude. I mean, and has a complete borderline consciousness about him, decided to line up behind Harbaugh on this. So I think that has to give somebody at the NCAA some pause, especially where I hope and think Harbaugh ain't backing down on this. And I mean, he's never going to say, oh, I lied to the NCAA or I misled the NCAA. Ain't happening.
Right.
And good for him. And so how this resolves, I don't know.
And the crazy thing is, like, they're conceding mistakes.
Yeah, they concede that that maybe they bought a kid a hamburger, or they saw some kid on Zoom during a dead period. They're saying they did that. Big deal. Tennessee had 232 violations, and they gave them essentially 2 scholarship punishment, which is essentially a 0 scholarship punishment in today's.
Man.
Well, I mean, are we just talking about Harbaugh's punishment here? Because there's a show cause. The things that they listed in there are show cause for Mike McDonald, which, whatever, he probably asked for that, so no one would call him about college jobs ever again. The rest of it, though, like Sharon Moore is going to get a game suspension.
Yeah.
Grant Newsom's going to get a game suspension.
Yeah.
Like it does. The only thing that I thought might be a little unfair is Michigan did seem to have recruits up for visiting during COVID, which was, probably does not get you as much as paying players hundreds of thousands of dollars for years and years and years. But it was a small benefit, and Harbaugh had to know that was the kind of stuff was going on, because he reads 24/7, and I do too, and we all knew that they were going to be there. And I'm not sure it's fair to even have the assistants take the shot. Like if we're going to punish anybody here, I'd rather punish Harbaugh. Hey,
just want to let you know that I fully back the reader's office.
Yeah, I would say that
okay.
If to the extent Michigan's punished, they should be punished for the substantive offenses. Whatever is ordinary and usual for the substantive offense is fine. They should take the punishment and they get what they deserve. So I agree with that. But it doesn't seem that it's all that clear what's going to happen here at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And things can change overnight. Think about Tony Petitti opening up Big Ten Media Days last week. And one of the questions was, what about expansion? He said, I've been given my marching orders. And the marching orders are concentrate on USC and
Seeing
UCLA,
UCLA.
getting them acclimated to the Big Ten, figuring out scheduling as far as the Olympic sports are concerned. Figure that out, and we'll talk about more teams sometime down the line. Here we are a week later, guys, and the door to expansion seems to be open wide with several reports. First, of course, by Yahoo, stating that the Big Ten presidents, I don't know how many. I mean, it just said presidents met and had sort of exploratory discussions about adding Washington and Oregon to the Big Ten, and basically because the Pac-12 seems like it's imploding right. I mean, it is imploding right before our eyes, and Washington and Oregon are going to have to do something. They're in a position where if Arizona leaves, which it looks like they will, and we'll talk about that, and then Arizona State and Utah follow suit, there is no more Pac-12. So now Washington and Oregon, they either stand pat and try to add some teams to what is left of the Pac-12, which seems ridiculous because this deal that Kliavkoff came at them with for $25 million surely wouldn't be on the table without the Arizona schools in Utah. You could become an independent. I guess that could work. Or you could go join the Big 12, which seems the most likely scenario. And if you're the Big 10, part of your expansion future has always been, okay, we're going to add Washington and Oregon at some point. You can't let them go to the Big 12. I think that's what's kind of fueling this this sense of urgency, if you will, that is suddenly evident with Big Ten presidents.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One, I've seen a lot of noise in the last day or two about Florida State and Clemson. Now, I also saw, I think this is from Pete Thamel or from Andrea, that that the cost of certainly for FSU leaving the ACC is $120 million. I mean, they $120 million. I mean, let me put it this way. It's going to take a lot of pitching of skull and pork rinds to make up to make up $120 million. And so I don't see, that contract with ESPN runs through 2036. So either they're going to have to make some amends with ESPN, which I think is they owned by Comcast. I don't know who they're owned by, but I don't see where that money is made up so easily for them. So I don't think it's any kind of a walk in the park for either Clemson or FSU, even if you want those dudes, which I don't, but others might, at all in the Big Ten. Then you got Oregon.
I want FSU, but keep going.
Yeah, even Oregon and Washington. Okay, you have to look at their situation in the context of what they have now, and with the Pac imploding around them, doesn't it seem reasonable that if they got 2% or 3% more, they would view this as a major win?
Right.
So they as opposed to zero, and so they may be in a situation where they can negotiate a Godfather offer as far as the Big Ten is concerned, where they're taking a much smaller piece of the pie.
That's
and they would take a smaller piece of the pie in the context of what they bring to or might bring to the Big Ten. So you could bring them in on an if comes sort of contract, saying, well, let's see what happens. Let's see how much in revenue is actually generated by the city of Seattle, essentially, and does that does that justify their value, and how much excess value should they get? I think the Big Ten's in a power position with those two schools. Love to, makes sense for them at this point to be in the Big Ten, given everything else. Then you got Cal and Stanford, a whole different deal. Those guys are really in a terrible situation, but the Big Ten is
Stanford doesn't have a president.
Yeah,
I don't know how Stanford can't sign anything. They don't have anybody at the meeting.
Well, I mean, let's go back to 1885.
Okay.
In 1880, and because I think who would have thought, I was rewriting this yesterday, who would have thought this is relevant? But in 1885, the president of Harvard University thought football was too brutal. He was certainly right, and the game should be abolished. So he just said, "And we're not playing any football at Harvard anymore." Well, what happened? All the money, all the good students said, "We're going to Yale." Right. And so even as much as he despised football, although the reasons are bizarre, and it wasn't really the violence, but as much as he despised football, he realized that his school was going to go in the tank. Same thing, and at the same time when the University of Chicago was created on the backs of football. It wasn't a school that created a football program like most places. It was a football program that created a school. And that's not a joke. And so they hired this complete snake, Amos Alonzo Stagg, to form a football program. And out of that, the University of Chicago became a really good, fine, one of the best schools in the country, funded and founded by basically John D. Rockefeller, because he wanted to compete with Leland Stanford. And he couldn't do it without football. And he was smart and recognized that's what we're going to have to do. Well, Cal and Stanford are sort of in that same spot. If all of a sudden they don't have football programs, or if they're just San Jose State, it impacts them on the academic side, and it impacts them on what kind of college they actually have. So do I think they might be willing to make major wholesale concessions and to become completely at will, let's call them at will employees of the Big Ten? Yeah, I think that's possible.
There's just so much more that goes into this, though.
Yeah,
Matt Brown wrote a really good article on his Substack yesterday about like all these considerations, like what are we selling? Who's going to take it? Who's going to take the extra TV inventory? So right now the Big Ten's looking around going, well, the Pac-12 is falling apart, the ACC is falling apart. We did this, so we have to take responsibility for the fact that we undermined this thing until like even the shred of an empire that existed, right, is the Habsburgs are just falling apart. And now we've got a war of Spanish succession, and we got to grab it because you can't leave it for the Bourbons, right? So here we are, and we're trying to figure out, okay, how much can you sell this for? Because, you're not going to get a Cal versus Rutgers game at 10 o'clock at night. No one's going to want that, right? And the partners that they already have already soaked in a whole lot of games, but what they want, they'll soak in a ton of games if they can get a Michigan or versus one of these games, right? So if you get a Michigan-Oregon game, it's worth it. So one of the questions they have to ask is, will Michigan, will Ohio State, will Penn State go out to Oregon, go out to Cal, and turn those into big games and play at night or play on a Thursday? Because what you have to do is expand the days that the times that you'll play the games in order to give them more inventory and to get your higher level of TV. That's the only way the deal is worth it. On the other hand, you don't want to, let someone else get rich off of this. So there's a lot of considerations in there, not to mention the fact Stanford doesn't have a president right now. The president's the ones who make these decisions. Northwestern might have to fire their president right now. I don't know if he gets to make a decision. There's a lot more that's going into this. And making a decision that can affect you in 40 years based off of what's going on in the now is really dangerous.
So, for so long as we had this discussion, I think we have appropriately, when talking about the Big Ten's criteria for adding schools, we've appropriately forwarded academic prestige as a major sort of tenet, if you will, of appeal, right? I mean, make no mistake. Yeah. I think, though, as we move forward, the importance of football revenue has increased almost exponentially, to the point where I see, if you're going to 20 teams, I see Cal and Stanford as non-starters, Craig. as much academic prestige as they bring to the table, and while AAU membership and research dollars, the money that flows from the academic prestige of those institutions would dwarf what they would bring in athletically. Make no mistake. But what is driving this expansion or this realignment conversation is football revenue, and I think it's because these dollars, this deal that the Big Ten just signed, it's $1 billion deal over 7 years. They're saying by the end of the deal, these institutions are going to get $90 million per school. Every school in the Big Ten is going to be getting $90 million. So everything that you do moving forward has to be about, from a expansion standpoint, realignment standpoint, has to be about growing that number. And why? Because they are going to have to pay the players. They're going to have to pay the players. That day is coming. So if you start making moves that take away, if it doesn't add to your bottom line, if it just makes you stay status quo, you're losing, in my opinion, because we're talking maybe $30 million down the line is going to have to go to the players out of this pie. So, building this number past that point has to be your goal. Stanford and Cal in no way, shape, or form help you get there. Washington and Oregon can, especially if they're willing to take a smaller piece of the pie, to your point. And that is the premise. This is a non-starter if they aren't willing to take less. The presidents and ADs have all said, the money I have in my pocket right now, you don't touch it. Anyone that touches it can't come. Washington and Oregon are in a position right now, it seems, where, hey, you know what? For the duration of the contract, whenever we come in, we'll take less, right? Right. So just let us in, because it's still probably more than they would get from the Pac-12, right? If you're only going to be at 20, if that's the number, then Washington and Oregon, then you got to look east. And I'm telling you, man, Florida State, the only thing that Florida State doesn't have is AAU membership, Craig. And I don't know how important, this is why I made this point. The academic prestige has been at the forefront of what you think about, or toward the forefront of what you think about in these expansion discussions with the Big Ten. And if AAU membership is if it constricts your, the number of schools that you can consider, I think you are artificially limiting your options, or unnecessarily limiting your options, in a way of a team like, or a program like Florida State. That's a top 25 public institution. They're ranked higher than Penn State. They're ranked higher than Michigan State. There's a bunch of schools that ranked higher than Oregon and Washington. The only thing they don't have is AAU membership, but they give you the state of Florida. They give you football prestige. They give you all that revenue. They make a ton of sense. If Florida State can get out, you skip over Stanford and Cal, you jump south and you go get Florida State.
I just don't see, at the moment at least, you could be right. And you probably are. But I don't see how they get out of their deal with ESPN. And for them to walk away from that deal, they owe $120 million, Sam. 120.
I say we let Brian in the chat and let him answer.
Oh, is he around?
There's Brian. Let's change our clothes here a little bit. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Well, how are you guys?
Doing all right. So Craig is saying Cal and Stanford. Add them. I'm saying skip Cal and Stanford. Give me Washington, Oregon, and Florida State. Now we'll figure out the fourth team. What say you?
I mean, I guess it depends on what your values are. And it's clear that college football doesn't have any. So, no, seriously, we're talking about the dismemberment of the Pac-12, and the Big Ten is holding the gun and pretending they didn't shoot.
Well said.
And, those programs used to mean something. Conferences used to mean something, but now we're headed for a 20-team conference that makes no sense logistically, makes no sense geographically. It has Rutgers and Maryland in it. And
Rutgers is taking a bigger cash. Rutgers is going to turn to Oregon and be like, hey, look at all my money.
Well, yeah. So, kudos to Jim Delaney, who managed to look at college football, and he looked past all the pageantry, all the rivalry, all the tension, all the meaning, and saw what it really was. which was a collection of TV markets. And like this whole thing is disgusting. Taking Texas and Oklahoma is disgusting for the SEC. Taking UCLA and USC is disgusting for the Big Ten. It's going to be awful. Every part of this is awful. Like talking about picking up Florida State. Yeah, that's good for the student athletes. Let's have them fly across the country for their badminton games. Like, that's going to be good for their education. They're going to be taking an exam in the middle of a hotel in Los Angeles in October. Like, I don't know, man. I feel just appalled at everything that's going on. Because, Washington State means something to people.
Yeah, I mean,
Oregon State means something to people, and all these programs are screwed. They're screwed.
They are.
Yeah. I mean, we're all bozos on this bus. There's no question about that. And the bus is just money. It's all it is. And I'm not sure you're right. It's not a good thing.
I guess I feel stupid for thinking it was ever anything else.
Oh yeah, man. Look, it's just where the money is bigger, but who's getting it is changing. I think that while the pageantry and nostalgia of yesteryear was appealing, it had its day, and it kind of just is what it is. Unless you have a number of people who see it the way that you do, Brian, from the standpoint of, we've kind of lost our way. To me, it seems the focus has kind of shifted to making sure players get paid. Making sure players.
Players are going to get paid either way. This is more about consolidating power.
Well,
you're throwing out.
How much are they going to get paid, though? How much are the players going to get paid?
They're going to get paid whatever is available to get paid. But I understand that teams are like, okay, we got to be in the big conference so that we're competitive. What I'm talking about is from the perspective of the conferences. Like, there used to be a day in college athletics when the CCHA had Alaska Fairbanks and the WCHA had Alaska Anchorage. And those hockey schools were there because they were in a conference, and that gave them security. That gave them a reason to play. And it wasn't a financially smart decision for either of those conferences. They did it because they thought it was for the good of the sport. And I don't see the good of the sport being involved in any of these decisions. All of these decisions make the sport worse. We've been in a division with Maryland and Rutgers. Can you remember a single one of those games except 78-0?
No, I cannot.
Is there any reason? I mean, what they're doing is they took a product that was a great product, and there's a great Cory Doctorow article on the internet. I don't think I can actually talk about what the title is. It's encrapification. He uses a different word. Or what happens is your Amazon or your Google, and you corner a market, and you have a great product, and then what you do is you start monetizing the product by making it worse. And that's the last 30 years of college football, where you're getting worse games. Like, look at Michigan's non-conference schedule. We had UCLA lined up, but Ward Manuel canceled that series because he needed money for the most profitable athletic department in America. Like, we used to see Michigan play Florida State in the non-conference. We used to see them play Florida State, Notre Dame, and Boston College in the same year. And this year we're playing nobody for the second consecutive year. Our division schedule is 3 teams we care about: Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State, and then garbage. And the games are 4.5 hours long. They cut 12 plays out of every game this year so they can show more ads. Like, what are we doing here? We're making the experience worse for literally everybody involved except the television executives. It's garbage.
So,
well, not just the television executives, the coaches, the administrators,
parasites.
The point is, there's people who've been making a lot of money off of this. They're looking down the pipeline and saying 30% of their gross is going to have to start going to the players, because the players are going to win the rights to the TV market. And therefore, 30% of what we're making now is going to have to move to the players. They know it's coming down the pipe. And so instead of saying, you know what, we millionaires who are making millions of dollars just sitting on top of organizations should make less, they are just finding other ways to get that money. And everything that they can do, as Brian said, it's the grossification of the product. What you're doing is trying to find money in every single corner you can, and they have not hit it yet. The problem is every time they do one of these things, they take away 12 plays off of every game. They expand games to 4 hours. They play at night on a Thursday. All the things they do that are supposed to piss off fans don't seem to drive away the fans.
They do
right?
drive away the fans.
They've
Is
scheduled UCLA.
Is there a waiting list for season tickets anymore? No.
No, but
there used to be
the
a
wait
waiting
list. They
for
didn't make any
season
money
tickets.
off the wait list.
Well, I understand that, but what you're doing is you're taking a product that's pretty good and you're making it worse and worse and worse until you hit that inflection point where it's just crappy enough to make enough money. And I don't have to respect that. I don't have to respect that process. I don't have to respect the people who are making things worse in the name of their bottom line.
And yet, while it may be a worse experience, I think to Seth's point, somehow the revenue keeps going up. If it's not fans in the seats, the dollars. I guess my position on this is, I've never been a subscriber to the theory that the betterment of the student athlete, the spirit of camaraderie and kinship, conference wise, has been at the fore of the power brokers of the NCAA. I've never had that opinion. So the fact that it's more obvious that that's not their motivation anymore doesn't bother me as much.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that these guys were, saints, but the NCAA did go to the Supreme Court to try to prevent games from being on television. Like, there used to be a different day, It used to be a totally different thing. And I feel like, Jim Delaney really opened the floodgates, because, you can add Penn State, that makes some sense. You can add Nebraska, that makes some sense. That doesn't change anything. But when you add Maryland and Rutgers to completely deform your conference, you broke it. And that's his legacy, is breaking college football. And I hope he dies and goes to hell and has to watch Rutgers play Maryland the rest of eternity.
Jim Delaney is revered in some circles.
I'm sure he is. And everybody in those, I got an email from a guy who was defending Dave Brandon to me once, and I looked him up, and he was like the director of promotions for the Phoenix Coyotes or something.
Hi, I'm Dave Brandon.
And there are people out there who are absolutely soulless automatons. I get that. I don't have to respect them. I don't have to pretend that they're anything else other than just all they care about is the bottom line. All they care about is the money going in their pocket. And that's a disgusting way to live. And that's what college football is right now.
Well, but the problem is,
wait. We got to get to a break. We'll pick this up on the other side here. MGoBlog Roundtable on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, the ticket.
Clear on radio.
The problem is it's not going to change. They're going to expand. You're right. And so who do I want? Do I want Clemson and FSU? No, I don't. As a fan, I'll take Stanford and Cal. It fits more with my own sort of last vestige of being a fan. Yeah. But there's lots of things I would change. So.
Yeah, I want to put the Big Ten in the position where they are best positioned to pay their players the most that they get. This is going to be an arms race with when it comes to which conference can really set their players up with the kind of TV share that makes a difference. Well, so the SEC is going to be in that position. I think you want a spot in the Florida market.
If this is the way it's going to go, then Michigan should leave the Big Ten.
Yeah.
If this is all you're talking about, why is Michigan carrying along Indiana, Northwestern, Rutgers, Maryland? Like if we're
But
just
you got to
talking
play
about,
somebody, right? You got to play
yeah,
somebody.
play somebody, but you can find people. Like there's no reason to be in this conference if we're just talking about that.
Yeah, I think the next evolution, because we're a couple steps away from that still, but I do think Brian's right. The next evolution of this is that big schools, the ones who can really command it, maybe Notre Dame's going to start it by signing some crazy contract where they stream everything themselves. The big schools are going to cut out the media middlemen. That instead of needing a subscription to, they're going to say, look, the only reason anybody has a subscription to NBC's, whatever their thing, or the Peacock network, right? The only reason they have that is to watch 3 Michigan games a year.
Didn't
Well,
Texas try that with the Longhorn Network though?
yeah.
I'm not saying
they
that
tried to
Michigan's
put that
gonna
on
do it
cable.
alone. What I'm saying is that Michigan and Ohio State are going to be looking at this revenue share where it's even, and they're going to be like, no, because we can't compete with Georgia and Alabama as long as we're giving half of our revenue to the MOOCs in the conference. Like, there's no reason to be in this conference anymore.
Well, if you're making $70 million, they're projecting they're going to make $70 million.
Yeah, just go to the SEC and you'll make more. Just dump it and kick Vandy out of the SEC. Just kill everything except your bottom line.
Well,
If that's what we're doing, why are we in this conference?
Because I don't think so. I don't think it's all that. I don't think
It
it's
is
all revenue.
That's all it is. That's all it is.
If it was all revenue, then what you're saying would be the case. They would just leave.
They're going to. They are going to at some point. It's probably going to be 10 years down the road, but the day when a Northwestern is in a major athletic conference, when Rutgers is in a major athletic conference, is passing.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could be. I mean, overnight, or seemingly overnight, pretty quickly, the pack is just dead. And
Arizona.
they were. I mean, that conference is gone.
Yeah, sure said Arizona be gone in a week. They'll be gone in a week, and likely with Arizona State and Utah following to the Big 12.
And so, I mean, there's two strains going on, as Brian points out. One is how much money can you make? And do you have an obligation in this competitive reality, as you point out, Sam, to make as much money as possible? In which case, why are we subsidizing Northwestern, Rutgers, Maryland? And for example, or you look at the whole big picture and say, I really like the Oregon State fans, which I actually do. I rode on an air flight with a bunch of Oregon State fans a few years ago. And I really like the Oregon State fans, and I like the Wazoo fans. And, we want to make sure those programs continue a certain level of viability. And so we've become, communists. We're in this communist socialist system.
Look, I'm just coming at this from I agree with Brian on most of this. He's right that all the decisions here, you can just follow the money and it's exactly where they're going. And if you want to project where they're going to be in 10 years, follow the money and they'll tell you exactly where they are. The only difference is I've just expected this. I got into college football. I became a humongous college football fan because I knew we were getting a steal my entire life. When I was going to games as a college student and we got to play amazing games in the non-conference and then amazing games in the conference. And I got to sit in that stadium, even though there was a wait list because I was a student, that was a steal. And that was what college football always was. The idea was because it's college instead of pro, the coaches are going to get paid less. Everything's going to be a little cheaper. You're going to sit on benches and everyone gets this wonderful thing that's not going to be full of money. And Michigan Stadium's not going to have any advertising in it. That was the deal. And we're so used to having the deal. We've forgotten what a great deal it was. Why college football is just what was the greatest entertainment that America ever came up with. And they're monetizing it now. It's going to suck.
All right, stand by, guys. Back in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Matt the Mizler on the other side, and the MGoBlog Roundtable crew with us. And so I guess my response, Brian, is to the discuss that I don't think you're on an island at all. I see a lot of people in the chat that agree with you. Craig agrees with you, for instance. I'm in the horses out of the barn, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going back. So that being the case, if you got to add teams, which they're going to add teams, who would you add?
I don't know. The University of Kandahar,
Well, no,
possibly Mumbai Tech. We gotta have a worldwide presence. Mumbai has a lot of people, great television market. Maybe we can get the.
Would you be in favor of adding Washington and Oregon, or would you skip out west, adding more out west teams altogether?
I mean, I don't care. Who cares? Like, what does it matter? Like, I guess what I want to do is I want to add as many West Coast teams as possible. I want to kick Rutgers and Maryland out of the conference. I want to have a West division that's basically the Pac-10. I want to have an East division that's basically the Big Ten, and I want the conference championship game to be at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that might actually happen. A conference championship at the Rose Bowl. That was actually forwarded in one of the pieces. It might have been Damel's piece. It seems like because the Pac-12 will be no more. I said this during the break for people on radio who are just joining us again. Wildcat Authority's Jason Shear, who is really tapped in down there in Tucson, said that he thinks Arizona could be going to the Big 12, within a week. If Arizona goes and Arizona State's going, and it really seems like Utah is much more willing to leave now. So that block of 3 teams going to the Pac-12 puts Washington and Oregon in a position where they can't just be patient and wait for the Big Ten to want them. Either the Big Ten says you can come right now, or they go to the Big 12. I think that's the situation that's making the Big Ten kind of move, provided, to your point, Craig, Washington and Oregon are willing to take a smaller share, and it sounds like they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sam is right, whether we like it or not, that the horse is out of the barn.
The horse is out of the barn.
Right. And so I don't like that, but it's a fact. And for the moment, at least. Now, Marshall McLuhan says at some point, everything, once you take any media to the nth, that it reverts and becomes its opposite. I don't want to get into that now, but for the moment, I think there's some chance that will happen here. But once the horse is out of the barn, you ask me who I want back in the barn. I want Cal and Stanford, because it does create a Big Ten West with at least 6 teams on the West Coast. And I don't care about Clemson and Florida State. So as a fan, that's what I want. How the Big Ten gets them in there and what the money is, whatever.
So you say add Cal and Stanford, not even Washington and Oregon.
No, if you're going to go to 20, go to 20 and add all 4 of them.
And why Washington and Oregon, though? Just to complete the Western bloc?
Yes.
Florida State is a more highly regarded academic institution than those two.
Not in my mind.
Then the University of Washington?
Yeah, not in my mind. I mean, it may be a fact. I don't know.
Washington is number 19 in the USA Today rankings. I think Florida State is right there. I have to go find Florida State.
I mean, I don't put any credence in those.
They're tied.
Because they're everybody's gaming. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Those don't mean a damn thing to me.
All I say is watch Body Heat. Where did William Hurt go to school in Body Heat? That's it. And so
nobody knows what either of those things are, Craig.
What is Body Heat? Was a movie?
Best movie ever made. And William Hurt, who plays a down and out lawyer there, went to FSU, and look at the opposing counsel's eye rolling.
Okay.
In that movie. In any event.
So, I mean, if you look at what the Big Ten generally is, it's flagship state schools.
Yeah.
And then, you have the occasional loser like Michigan State thrown in there. So for me,
really gonna get hate mail this week.
Well,
Florida State ranked higher than Michigan State in the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, but let's like Michigan
Not in
State
my
doesn't
mind.
belong in the Big Ten. Are they a flagship state school? No, they're a teachers' college that got ideas. But so Oregon and Washington makes sense, and frankly, Michigan, like the Big Ten, should be going after Utah. Utah actually has a program. Utah has a fan base. Utah has a place you can go in November, and after you watch the football game, you can go skiing. It's cool. Get Utah. I mean, they're not going to, but anyone who watched that Utah USC game at Utah is like, this is a place we should be. Like, they command the television market of Salt Lake City, which probably isn't as amazing as other television markets, but they have actual ownership of it. Unlike Rutgers, where they're technically in New York, the TV market, but nobody's even heard of who they are. So, I mean, Utah's attractive, and like, at some point, maybe Notre Dame's gonna crack, and you got to hop on that. Like,
Oh, no doubt.
so, I mean, for me, it's Washington, Oregon, Utah, Notre Dame is the ideal.
Yeah, I could live with that. Assuming with the realities that we have.
At least if Michigan played any of these teams, which is not a guarantee, they would be interesting games, unlike Rutgers and Maryland.
I don't think we'll ever see the day where the Big Ten kicks the team out, which I would love. I would love to be wrong about that.
But I feel like we talked about this in the break. We didn't talk about it on radio, but at this point, we have these conferences with this every man for himself mentality. How long before that applies to the schools themselves? And if the Big Ten brings in Washington and Oregon with the stipulation that you're not getting a full share, well, that opens some doors, doesn't it? Because right now, everybody in the Big Ten is getting the same amount of money from the TV contract, even though that is blatantly unfair to Ohio State and Michigan. Like, what game is the first pick from Fox every year? Michigan, Ohio State. And like, we see Florida State rattling their sabers about how much money they're getting from the conference relative to the other people in the conference. How long before that comes to the Big Ten? How long before Ohio State gets outbid by Georgia for a cornerback and says, this is garbage. Why is Northwestern getting the same amount of money as me? I mean, we saw that lead to the dissolution of the, well, I guess not the dissolution of the Big 12, but Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12. We're seeing rifts in the ACC. Why would that not apply to this conference?
Well, Northwestern has a better car wash.
All right, that'll have to do it for us today, folks. We'll pick this up next week. Always a blast on the MGoBlog Roundtable. Back tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket, the official voice of the University of Michigan Sports Ann Arbor, a Cumulus station.